Welcome back to the 10th episode of the Emerging Markets Entrepreneur. Can you believe it, Alex? We've done 10 episodes already. It feels like we just started this program.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sid.
Yeah. So what we thought we would do today is just quickly recap some of the things that we've been talking about over the first couple of episodes. And then let's just recap some of the conversations that we've had with our expert guests that we've been speaking to. And then really kind of pave the way for what we plan on doing with the next 10 episodes. So Alex, let's go back to episode 1. We talked about liquidity, and that was when COVID was just kind of like registering in people's minds and how to manage liquidity. What were the takeaways there?
Great. This was a discussion between you and me, and I think here the main lesson and learning for our listeners was to manage liquidity and the impact it has on the long term. So what is the criteria to sort of generate liquidity by decreasing your fixed costs, and what long-term impact it has? So what are the criteria that a business owner should look at? It's the cash impact, obviously. It's a strategic impact, and how long will take to reduce this type of fixed cost and then bounce back. It's about how long is the lockdown going to be, because at that time we didn't know how long the lockdown is going to be, but also look at social responsibility.
Yeah, I think
encompass that in the decision making of should I or should I not reduce my fixed costs.
I remember you said something very interesting then. You said, how do I run a business on zero revenue? And I think that was something that we had to really think about. How did you manage your short-term cash requirement?
Of course. And I mean, that's still true, but I think now with lockdown level 2, I think very few businesses are on zero revenue.
Yep.
And I think that is sort of the main learning for me. And I mean, it depends on the business. If you have a high operating leverage, meaning high fixed cost percentage, then this is something probably more urgent that you have to do than someone who has a lower operating leverage.
Absolutely. And speaking of operating leverage, when we jump into episode 2, we talked a bit about fixed costs and the trade-off between having long-term fixed costs versus short-term variable, and ultimately seeing how we could reduce that. We talked a lot about server capacity, and we talked about what are some of the things that you could actually do without in that regard, including rent. I think you've been working remotely, work from anywhere for the last little bit, right?
Yeah. So the second episode, I think, this was a discussion with Cal Torrington, our lawyers, basically a lawyer that's very, well known in the startup space. And for me, the main aspect was, yes, it makes sense to reduce variable costs, and you have different levers to do that. Negotiate with your suppliers. It was in the sense of a discount, A, or B, on payment terms. Both have a liquidity impact. And the second thing was actually to increase your variable cost by moving fixed costs into variable costs. So that was sort of the two ways that we've discussed it. And then from a legal perspective, it was the contract is obviously the most important thing. And the relationship you have with your suppliers. So work on them. And I think that's sort of the main takeaways I got from here is particular, when we talked about marketing, should you reduce it or should you not reduce it as a variable cost? And we said, okay, first focus on something that has immediate impact and doesn't cost anything, such as email marketing. Then focus on the things that have maybe a long-term impact, but not an immediate impact, because your conversion rates are too low. So it doesn't make sense now to spend a lot of money on paid if your conversion rates are too low. And only if your conversion rates and lockdown eases and everything is going back, then put money into branding and really spend again for marketing. And I think that's the phase we're going into now. And I think what we've discussed there has been crucial also to run my own business. And that was great.
It's interesting, as we've gone through this journey together, we've seen our businesses go through a similar issue. And then it was almost serendipitous that when we get to the episodes 5, 6, 7, we start talking about how do you bounce back. And that's exactly where we are at right now. But before we put the cart ahead of the horse, let's talk a little bit about capital injection and that whole discussion that we had with Safiso Scanzana about raising capital, right? Equity, debt. What is that term you love using about what is it? A safe note. Yeah.
Safe note.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about, what are the different ways. Obviously, cost cutting comes first. Resourcefulness. We've had this word also in the next episode, and also when we talked to Mo, in I think that was episode
7, 8.
And, yeah, and I think once you've done really everything and you really can't do anything else, I think what we came to the conclusion is only then inject capital. If you have an option not to raise capital, do not raise capital right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to raise capital, we said, and we were all in agreement, and I think this was interesting, then raise debt. It goes probably quicker, and it's probably less damaging to you. However, keeping into consideration that debt might have a negative impact in the future on your cash flow again. So needs to be modeled into the cash flow properly. And then
you did raise debt as well, didn't you, after that conversation?
Did raise debt actually as a shareholder loan and from Standard Bank. So we injected debt from the business. There you also need to take a little bit precaution, because your net asset value could basically become negative if you raise too much debt. Because your assets, if you are a very asset-light business, so you have to be little bit careful then in terms of how your balance sheet looks. But generally, I think for everyone in this situation, I think you should rather.
But let me stop you there. Does it really matter if you're a privately held small business? I mean, at the end of the day, it's like asking a startup what your net profit is, right? Who cares?
Yeah, I think it only it's a legal thing in terms of when the company goes bankrupt, then
solvency,
insolvency and personal liability and things. I think then it makes a difference, but otherwise, you're absolutely right, it doesn't.
So let's move forward. Episode 4, we spoke to Colin, the managing director, or one of the managing directors at ABSA's investment banking outfit. He had some very interesting points about culture and building culture in an organization and doing that remotely. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think the main thing I sort of learned, or what I think the main points that Colin made is, this is a great opportunity for businesses to sort of change the way they operate. Many businesses work functionally, and we shouldn't work functionally. Functionally is very efficient when things are not changing, but because everything is changing, even pre-COVID, very rapidly, we need to have a different structure, and that structure should be agile and should be guided by purpose. And everything we do should be guided by purpose. And if we follow purpose and we really solve a real problem with this purpose, and these problems have changed, then we will be successful. And I think that was really insightful in terms of, in terms of how to structure your business, and how a purpose then determines your strategy and your structure. And I think that when you're resetting and pivoting, I think this is a really good basis for entrepreneurs to think about. And I think the only thing you really said, and that struck with me at the end, is also never do an experiment that hinders you to do an experiment again. So never do a sinking the ship error, basically, as we call it at Printulu, or crashing the plane error, because that doesn't help. But have that experimenting attitude, let people fail, learn from it, and become stronger and more resilient.
So to put it slightly differently, fail often, but fail cheaply.
Exactly. Right. You said it even in the episode.
I think I did. It's deja vu. It's deja vu right now. So episode 5, we spoke to Clive, and my favorite thing about that episode was eating the frog. And since then, I start my day every morning. The first thing I do is I find that one task that I don't want to do, the one that's been sitting in my email inbox for the longest time, and that's the first thing I attack on a daily basis. I eat my frog. Yeah, that was if you had to take one thing away, that would be it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, he gave us a real great, or entrepreneurs a real great productivity hack, that we focus on the important things and not only on the urgent things. Because I think, especially in COVID times and so many changes, you're just overwhelmed with all these information flying around and people wanting stuff from you. And I think in order to keep focused and level-headed, I think was a great advice. I'm doing this as well. But I think the other things that he mentioned, and I mean, we're repeating what we've discussed before there, is focus, do not chase valuation, but focus on cash flow. That's the main thing that every business should do. And I also liked his sort of segregation or categorization of businesses. The one that are really thriving right now in the COVID-19 pandemic, that was category green or A. Zoom, for example. They're really just like flying. Then
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon. Second category, people that are just self-sustaining. And then the third category, businesses that will go out of business that are like 90, 80, whatever % down. And these businesses, in his opinion, really need to pivot. So I think for every entrepreneur, it was great to sort of categorize, where am I right now? And he gave very specific advices of what you should do depending on the category. So for example, if you're in category 1, it was great if you push in terms of marketing, and if you really, go all in, basically. That's your time. We didn't talk about this in detail, but
to grow, basically, to capture market share.
And category two, he was just like very risk averse. Don't do too many things. Focus on wowing your existing clients, and like just focus on them. Create this wow experience, but don't
customer
make
service. Great customer service, staying in touch, calling your clients, keeping in touch.
Exactly. Yeah. Make it doesn't matter what hurdles you have, just try to focus on making it a great experience. And then category 3, I think that was the one we talked most about. I think that's very interesting, where a lot of people might still be looking for pivoting their business because the business is not the same as it was, is, the process of ideation. Okay, what sets of problems have changed, analyzing those and finding the right solutions. And I think that was a really great insight from me in terms of how businesses can really tangibly learn from a really experienced venture capitalist.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is, I've been getting a lot of email from City Lodge Hotels in South Africa, and they've been using their space to do other things. That's the whole point of a pivot, is how do you take a dead asset that's not generating anything and then use that space to generate some revenue? And they're doing all sorts of interesting things, which I think is quite cool. The next episode, we spoke to Alison Collier, and she spoke a lot about the category 1 businesses. So Endeavor works with a number of entrepreneurs. A lot of them in the SaaS space were actually seeing double-digit growth during this time. So they were really capturing the opportunity. And I think it's the first time I spoke to somebody since COVID started where they were talking about an optimistic side of this pandemic, the opportunities it presents. And that was a very interesting conversation.
So yeah, for me, I think it was really interesting as well from a perspective of, she basically said, if you're in the right sector, you are lucky, because then you can get venture capital and there are lots of opportunities. If you're in the wrong sector, kind of bad luck. The really gist, one of the things she said in one of the, not directly, but she sort of said it as an advice. It was kind of reverse engineer which sectors are prospering right now, and if you pivot into these sectors or pivot into these customer groups, because and I think that was really sort of smart to say, like really look at where the opportunities is unfolding, and then only look at what are sort of my assets and how can I employ or deploy those assets to utilize that opportunity. I found that very interesting. Other than that, I think she mentioned a lot of interesting industries that are benefiting: BPO, e-commerce, health tech, ed tech, agri tech, smart city, fintech. I mean, she mentioned a whole lot with a lot of examples, very tangible for entrepreneurs to sort of think about. Okay, what can I learn from this now in my instance? And yeah, it was a great, very tangible episode from my side.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one as well. We then spoke to Mohammed Duji from METL, Mohammed Enterprise Tanzania Limited, and I think that was a very inspirational episode because he told us about his story, which I think a lot of people are now familiar with. How he came back from the US and turned his $2 million trading business into a gigantic enterprise in Tanzania. I don't think there's anything that METL doesn't make in country.
Yeah, I think he said when he came back, I think it was 30 million or something, and then he turned it into a $1 billion business.
Absolutely.
So crazy, and that's absolutely insane. And I think the main lesson I took from this, I mean, is know your clients super well, know your competitors, and fill that gap. I think the example he made with the Red Bull bottle, where he's not using a can, but he's using a PET bottle, and Red Bull is using a can because the sparkling stays in longer, but he doesn't even need it because he knows the turnaround times of his bottle, so he can use the PET bottle, and that's why he's cheaper and more competitive, more efficient, and he can turn around a lot more bottles and taps into this market. And I think that the understanding of how well he understands markets, the whole market dynamics, I think that was insane. And I think that's always where I'm like, am I missing something? So whenever I think about Mo, then I'm thinking about, okay, this insight into markets, clients, competitors, it was just insane how he digested and the learnings and the execution he did from this.
Absolutely. And I think another interesting thing for me was how he's embracing digital transformation. His business is largely in traditional sectors of manufacturing. And he has some services and other things, but like he's talking about now fulfillment services like Amazon does. He wants to build a platform, a marketplace. So it's very interesting to see that even somebody like that, he's still hungry. Exactly. So the takeaway is remain hungry. We then spoke to Carl from Yoko, and just I think we need to spend a minute to just recognize what happened in Beirut. It's just completely unfortunate, and thoughts and prayers go out to absolutely everybody who's watching from Lebanon. Guys, we're really sorry that this happened, and maybe if there's something that you may learn here to help the relief effort or anything like that. And very apologetic.
Sid is saying this because Carl Watson is from Lebanon, and he was, while we were recording this, he was actually in Lebanon, and this
Beirut.
is why we directly reached out to him whether he's safe, and we're very, very happy that nothing happened to him.
Absolutely. But that was very interesting. Well, I think one of the interesting things is I've been familiar with Yoko as a brand for a long time, but the name, the thinking behind the name was quite interesting. Your Commerce. The access to data that they have, and they have the pulse on the SMME heartbeat of South Africa. They can see transaction data and they know exactly what's happening and what that actually means for the economy, probably before the guys at Stats SA or anybody that's calculating GDP sees it, right? It's very real time.
That was very interesting as well. I think obviously only the formal market with card transactions, so it's only an approximate, but I think it's a great way to assist the economy. But what I also found sort of interesting is what Sifiso was also mentioning a little bit on. They are really taking care of the whole value chain. So they are really taking care of the merchants. They're dealing with their clients, because they understand if their value chain dies, they're going to die. And they've put in a tremendous effort to really assist their merchants and to also now to bounce back. They've just launched a new video, amazing, watch it, about reopening. And I think that was great. I think the second two things that I think was good as they've redefined the way they're working. So remote work. CNBC Africa is doing a complete show on this. So you should.
Thank you for the plug.
You should definitely tune in there. And then I think they've connected a lot of modern management and leadership philosophy, like radical transparency. That was sort of it's the approach of Ray Dalio, that was sort of filming himself for, I think, a month just with a camera in every meeting. And then also the concept from Netflix of freedom and responsibility, and how they are living this in the pandemic. And I think their also purpose and the core values was also switching in.
So we're not wanting to rush through this, but I think we were talking about purpose, and everything that you do has to have purpose. And that was really the core of our conversation with Pepe Moraes, right? Did I get to pronounce his last name correctly?
That's exactly where they connect. So actually Carl, Pepe, and also
Colin,
they're connected there. Yeah.
it's all about purpose and the mission. I think that was his was also a very interesting story. If you missed this episode, go back and watch episode 9. It was the one we did just before this, where we spoke to him. He was near bankruptcy and he completely turned his life around. And some of the productivity hacks, I think, on a personal level, was quite interesting. Some of the things that he said about how he changed his lifestyle and the exercise routine and the avoiding socialization and drinking gave him more time to do the things that he wants to do. As entrepreneurs, we find that we're always running out of time, right?
Yes, 100%. No, I think Pepe's episode really gave me a lot of energy. I think he was great. How he talked about how he turned around. Again, the motto of resourcefulness was a key ingredient of how he turned it around. How you have to make savings in order to have something for the worst or the not so good times or the bad times. And I think also understanding the client, they don't want to see ads on the COVID-19 global pandemic page, for example. I think he touched upon a lot of different advertising things and what a business should do and shouldn't do in a situation like this. And he talked from experience.
Absolutely. Alex, I think we've done a good job of covering what we've spoken to, who we've spoken to, what we've spoken about. So
100%. So please, if you like our episode, everyone, please ring the bell, subscribe to our channel. That would mean a lot to us. And we will continue now with a new set of new speakers. The next one is going to be John Sane. Some of them might know him from the Forbes event in 2018. And from the under 30 event. And we hope you listen in. And it's also going to be centered around, how to bounce back, how to grow a business in this environment. And I hope you will like the content and learn from it.
Looking forward to it. Alex, speak to you soon.